Today we have a summary about theme called Patriotism in Moriarty. But before we start, I ask you to support the channel with a like and a subscription. Enjoy watching. It all begins with a boy trying to escape from someone, but he gets caught, tied up, and then killed. This is already the 7th such incident reported in the news. The killer is targeting the children of various shop owners frequented by aristocrats, but just in case, he also took a homeless boy. Albert, the elder Moriarty brother, visits the father of the murdered boy. They exchange a few words, and the father tells him he would gladly take care of the killer himself. Next, we see an unsuccessful street musician. William Moriarty approaches him and offers him a treat in exchange for a few questions. He asks about the accordion the boy is playing. It turns out to be the instrument of the murdered boy. William goes to the crime scene, where he concludes that someone from the Gaster Club committed the crime. It's a popular place for wealthy gourmets. At home, the Moriarty brothers decide that Eden, the father of the murdered boy, should be given the opportunity to deal with the killer. Next, William meets with Count Argleton, the club's founder. He notes that all the jewelry the Count wears was purchased from shops where the owner's children were later killed. Additionally, the spot where Argleton is seated has a perfect view of the square where one of the boys was murdered. Take a look. After that, the Count ordered his subordinate to get rid of William, but he, along with Louis, the youngest of the Moriarty brothers, gave him a good beating. Then we see Argleton tied up and Eden poking him a bit with scissors. The next episode starts with a story about how the poor are poor and the rich are rich. We see William telling a childhood story to his travel companion on the train. It then shows young William giving helpful advice to everyone he meets. Upon arriving home, a courtier scolds him for daring to ride with Albert in the family carriage. This is because William and Louis were taken in at Albert's initiative, as both were exceptionally smart for their age, even by adult standards. In the orphanage, everyone loved them, and even the older kids listened to William's advice. Next, Albert overhears a conversation among passers-by about old Thompson, whose basement was robbed. It turns out that William helped the thieves with his advice, and later he heard William encouraging his peers to consider killing aristocrats for the good of society. After reflecting on William's words, Albert concludes that this ideology resonates with him as well. In the Moriarty household, everyone shows their disdain for the adopted siblings. It turns out that Lord Moriarty adopted them at the request of a lady he is fond of, even though he has a wife. Louis prepares tea at William's request, another brother, but William pours out the tea and starts belittling Louis. However, William stands up for him. He is ordered to stab Louis with a fork as punishment, but he ends up injuring himself. At breakfast, the mother suggests getting rid of the adopted children, but the Lord refuses because high society would not forgive them for such an act. William comes up with the idea to set them up, so they have a reason to get rid of William and Louis. Albert, tired of their conversations and mocking them in his mind, leaves the room. He believes that all aristocrats are the main evil of this world. Albert approaches William for advice, and they decide not to adopt William, Albert's younger brother. This is their way of striving for an ideal world. They staged it all as an accident and used gas to burn down the estate, getting rid of Albert's entire family in the process. As a result, William, Louis, and Albert became a new family. A fellow traveler sympathized with William and remarked that he now lives in an ideal family, like straight out of a picture. Next, we see the poor people asking an aristocrat for help. Their son is critically ill and needs a doctor, but they are refused because the problems of the poor should not inconvenience the wealthy. The train with William arrived at the station and he headed to the Goatspeed estate. William will teach mathematics at a university there. On the way, he encounters the same woman named Michelle, who had asked for help for her son. As a result, the child passed away, which made her hate all aristocrats. William receives dinner invitations at home from Viscount Belkford. The Moriarty brothers go to his estate. There, Belkford complains to them about his heart condition and explains that he treats it with a medication called henin. This medicine is made in the orangery by his attending doctor. They go to look at his plants where they meet a gardener named Burton. At home, the gardener asks his wife Michelle why she continues to set the table for two even after the death of their son. At the first lecture, the students warmly welcomed William, calling him a young genius. He then went to a bar to meet Burton. He praises the gardener for his efforts and mentions that he knows about the son's tragedy. William offers him his consulting services and guides the gardener towards a player versus player confrontation with the Count. The Moriarty brothers went to another tea party at Belkford's, but this time they brought a treat. The juice they drank was prepared by Burton and Michelle, who without much thought went to confront the Count for letting her son die, but Burton stops her. She yelled that he will pay for allowing her son to die, after which the Count's heart started to hurt. Burton brings him the medicine and apologizes, but Belkford still dismisses him and Michelle. Then the Count's condition worsens. It turns out that the Swiss the Moriarty brothers gave Belkford interfere with his medicine, causing a sharp drop in blood pressure. They remind him of the time he refused to help a small child, after which Belkford dies, and Michelle and Burton move to live in London. Next, the homeless man hears a girl singing nearby, and after her dance, she takes a leap of faith. In the next lecture, William notices that Lucien is absent again. His friend Tate said that Lucien is sick, but William does not really believe it. Then Moriarty looks up information about him and discovers that he, like Tate, is a true noble. It turns out that Lucien is missing, and Tate has no idea where he is, which William also learns. The professor said he would handle the boy's disappearance and asked Tate not to get involved. Moriarty meets Dudley Bay Vale, the university administrator. During the conversation, Dudley expresses his disregard for the student's disappearance, but mentions that he has some connections in the police and will try to resolve the issue. William went to Lucian's favorite cafe, where his girlfriend Frida worked, to ask a couple of questions about the girl who jumped off the bridge at the beginning of the episode. He was told that she was cheerful and lively. Frida and Lucian were in love, and he even proposed to her as they were expecting a child. But Dudley deceived Frida into believing that Lucian had abandoned her, which led to her jumping off a bridge. Later, we see Lucian reveling in the plants at a drug den. Dudley approaches him with the news about Frida, but due to the effects of the drugs, Lucian doesn't comprehend anything. William asks Louis to send 2 telegrams, one to Fred and one to Colonel Moran. The gang set out to punish those responsible for Frida's death and for Lucian's intoxication. To begin, they went to a pub where Moran humiliated 3 chumps in a card game. Because he won, a waitress invited him to a room on the 2nd floor to take a better look at his winnings. Lucian regains consciousness, and Dudley rushes over, unable to comprehend how he escaped the drug den. Dudley confesses that it was his fault Frida took the leap of faith because he drugged her. William overhears his confession, and after a brief exchange, they start shooting at Dudley's legs, causing him to fall off a bridge and die. The gang then decides to dismantle the class system in the world. In the next episode, a pack of dogs chases a man and a hunter shoots him. A line of people from the lower class gathered around the outgoing liner. This displeased Count Enders, who considers them all trash, believing that this liner was created for aristocrats. This man is the target of the Moriarty gang. They want to turn London into a world of crime to get rid of the rigid class system. William wants the city's residents to witness the numerous crimes they orchestrate. On the way to the liner, Thomas Mickelson, a local thief and assaulter, starts yelling at Anderson because the Count is cutting the line, which infuriates him. Then Anderson argues with the staff because there is no table available for him in the first-class restaurant. Additionally, a girl spills juice on him, and he threatens not to employ her if it happens again. It turns out that the incident with the girl and Thomas in the line was orchestrated by Moriarty to agitate Anderson as much as possible. Later, William meets Sherlock, who, for fun, guessed the professions of passers-by. He stated that Moriarty was a mathematician. He deduced this by observing how long, from where, and at what angle William looked at the stairs. After that, Moriarty started showing off as well, talking about Sherlock's hobbies. During the ball, Lord Tenders was very angry when he was informed that his mansion had burned down. It turns out that he was the hunter who shot the man at the beginning of the episode. To relieve stress, he decided to hunt on the liner, since in his opinion, the lower class is no different from animals. He chose Thomas as his target, inviting him to his room and then killing him with a knife. At that moment, William entered the room and saw the murdered Thomas. Enders tries to convince him that there was an attempted robbery, and he was just defending himself. William pretends to believe this story and suggests simply throwing the body into the water, but other gang members catch Thomas. During the event, the Count approaches William and asks him to point out where the murdered Thomas is seated among the crowd. Enders, in a panic, runs after him and finds his body on the floor, and out of rage, he starts beating the dead body. He then grabs a knife to ensure the job is done. But at that moment, he is brought onto the stage, and everyone sees the Count stabbing Thomas's body. The crowd starts protesting, and the Count shouts that he is an aristocrat and gets to decide which commoner dies. With a knife in hand, he charges into the crowd, but Sherlock stops him. The Count tries to escape from the police as Holmes proceeds to examine the body. While fleeing, Anderson climbs a mast, but Colonel Moran starts shooting at him, causing Anderson to fall to his death. The incident begins to be talked about throughout the city, which pleases William greatly, but he is concerned about Sherlock Holmes, who noticed that the victim's body was dead before it appeared on stage, which led him to suspect Moriarty. Next, we see Sherlock's apartment, and a young Mrs. Hudson, who is yelling at him because he can't pay the rent. Stamford approaches them, and Sherlock starts begging him for money. Stamford suggests that Holmes find a roommate to share the rent. Sherlock gathered a few candidates to be his roommate, and suggested Mrs. Hudson choose who should live with him. After a couple of unsuitable candidates, Stanford suggests Dr. Watson, who at their first meeting finds Sherlock in a pool of blood, which turns out to be cow's blood. Using deduction, Holmes learns that Watson is a former medic who returned from Afghanistan. They go to a pub with Mrs. Hudson to celebrate becoming roommates. Inspector Lestrade joins them, to Sherlock's delight, as it means he has work coming his way. The inspector explains that at night, Count Drebo was killed, and the word Sherlock was written in blood next to the body, which led to Sherlock being arrested on suspicion of murder. They are met by Gregson, who very much wants to arrest Holmes. He starts questioning Mrs. Hudson and Dr. Watson, while Sherlock shares his suspicions about the crime with Lestrade. They are released and head to the crime scene. One of the maids was outside during the crime, waiting for a suitor who never showed up. Another ran to her parents' house because she received a note saying her father had died, but he turned out to be alive and well. The butler was drunk and asleep in his room. The cook had hearing problems and couldn't hear the gunshots. As a result, there was no one in the estate who could have heard the sounds of gunfire. The inscription was written not by the Count but by the killer, as Dreber's finger width was shorter than the width of the letters. The killer was an amateur, as there were 4 shots in total, and the bullets didn't hit any vital organs. All of this means that there was someone more experienced behind the killer, who devised the plan. Then Sherlock asked Lestrade to help him escape so he could calmly investigate this case. He meets with John and shows him the ring he stole from the mansion. This ring is very valuable to the killer, and he wants to get it back at any cost. Sherlock published a notice that he found the ring and is asking the owner to come and reclaim the piece of jewelry, but the Moriarty brothers immediately realize it was a trap. Holmes gathered a group of street urchins to help him because they know the city like the back of their hand. An elderly lady comes to the house and she skillfully tricks John. Watson, without hesitation, gave the ring to the lady, whom Sherlock then began to chase. But she wasn't just any old lady, and in fact she was a tough parkour expert who easily escaped from them. On the way home, Holmes tells Watson that he has already figured out who the murderer is, but before saying who, he hands John the driver case, which states that the Count had an affinity for women below his class, and they seldom returned home unharmed. He silenced them with influence or money, but one day Lucy, who married Hope, a local farmer, was found dead with gruesome marks on her body. This led to the conclusion that Hope is the killer, and at this moment, he is their coachman. Street urchins helped Sherlock arrive at this conclusion, revealing the killer. Hope told them how he killed the Count and offered Holmes a deal. Since Hope is terminally ill, he asks Sherlock to kill him, believing death at his hands would be an honor. He mentions that there is someone who helped him accomplish everything, for which he's very grateful, and that all the answers to the questions will be given only if Sherlock kills him. As soon as Sherlock reached for his pistol, Watson stopped him, arguing that it was wrong and he should be above that. Yet Sherlock fired anyway, though he shot at Hope's feet. He apologizes to him for not being able to fulfill his wish for death and turns him over to the police. At home, the Moriarty gang praises Sherlock for his intelligence and honor. They decided to give him the role of a hero in their play, which will unravel crimes and shed light on the darkness of this world. Due to the newspapers publishing the case of Count Reber's death, Sherlock's popularity increased dramatically. Many visitors started to come to him, and he was able to solve every case they brought to him. However, despite this, he began to feel increasingly sad. Sherlock found their puzzles trivial and is searching for something grand, akin to what the Moriarty gang orchestrated. Now he wants, at any cost, to find them. Holmes gets high and starts shooting at the ghost of Hope. The gunshots bring Mrs. Hudson and Dr. Watson running, and later Lestrade as well. Due to his bad mood, Holmes began to blame Watson for everything, because John stopped Sherlock from killing Hope. Watson said that he wouldn't solve cases with the murderer and left him. During lunch, Sherlock noticed the Moriarty brothers and immediately approached them. Louis tried to dismiss him, but William was not against having a conversation with him. They started talking on the night of the Viscount's death. Sherlock mentioned that recently there's been too much evidence suggesting that someone is deliberately killing aristocrats. As a joke, he also said that after Hope was imprisoned, he spoke with him, and in confidence, Hope revealed that it was William Moriarty who orchestrated everything from behind the scenes. Louis guessed that Holmes was bluffing, but he still got nervous. They realized that Sherlock was dangerous and needed to be dealt with before it was too late. William then told Holmes to catch him if he could, which delighted him greatly. After that, they heard screams and upon arriving, saw a bloodied body. William and Sherlock decided to compete to see who would catch the killer first. The deceased jeweler from London is named Trevor Radbud. The murderer is a man who attempted to drug and rob Trevor, but after failing, he simply eliminated him. They finished the examination, and now they have only 38 minutes to discuss the matter. The Moriarty brothers began discussing the murderer. They concluded that he threw the knife and key out the bathroom window and then started washing his clothes. The shoes worn by the murderer are exclusive to the train service staff, so the search must be among the train crew. There are 6 of them. The staff was assembled in front of Sherlock and William. They started searching them and found blood on the cleaning attendant's gloves, but he said he simply cut himself through the gloves. However, William saw blood on the lenses of his glasses. In the end, he confessed to the murder and was arrested 3 minutes before the train arrived at the station. At the end of the episode, Sherlock is having a drink with John at a bar, where Holmes apologizes to him and they become partners again. Then they show the Queen and Mycroft Holmes, who has had very important documents stolen, and she orders them to be returned by any means necessary. But that will be in the second season, which means we can end the video here. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to support me. See you in the next video.